In Chapter 3, we'll be looking at a realm that many of you will be fairly familiar with, the North American realm. Although we often lump Mexico in with North America, for our purposes we'll be looking at Mexico along with several other regions in the Middle America discussion in the next chapter. We can glean a lot from our population map of the North American realm. People are concentrated near the coasts, and both the US and Canada have highly urbanized populations, with many people living in or near cities. Population is growing in both countries, and in both cases, immigration plays a major role. When we look at the physiographic map of North America, we notice a great deal of variety. We have bands of mountains, such as the Rockies in the west and the Appalachians in the east, and we also have lowland regions. Climate-wise, we see a lot of diversity. There are moist coastal zones and dry interiors, and even deserts. The physiographical features impact the climate, as on the west coast, where the oceans bring heavily moisturized air toward the Pacific Mountains, the mountains then force the air upward, cooling it and causing condensation, which is where we get those rainy climates in parts of the Pacific Northwest. The major drainage systems in the North American realm are the Great Lakes and the Mississippi-Missouri River system. North America was colonized by Europeans, including the French and the British. Prior to European arrival, there was a rich tapestry of millions of native peoples living across the country. These people originally came from Asia via Alaska, thousands of years before the European settlers arrived. In Figure 3A4, we can see the different indigenous domains spread across the realm. Genocide has mostly reduced these populations to a fraction of what they once were. We place the United States and Canada together because there's a lot of homogeneity between them. Specifically, they nearly universally share the English language. French Canada is a major exception. Although English as a language is undergoing a transformation as more people across the globe begin to speak it as a second language. Another commonality is religion, although this holds truer for the US than Canada. In the US, Protestant Christianity dominates. The textbook notes that people in this realm are fairly religiously tolerant, although they note that there are some exceptions. To show you a kind of wider view of the different denominations of Protestant Christianity and their concentrations across the realm, let's look at a map. Here we go. You can see a high concentration of Latter-day Saints, which are Mormons, in the southwest of the United States, and they were forced out there in the 19th century. The American South skews largely Baptist. In some of the Canadian provinces, you can see heavy concentrations of United Church members. In North America, we see a lot of straight-line boundaries. In some cases, we can see boundaries based on physiographic features such as rivers. In terms of natural resources, we see a variety. There are basically three zones that contain most of the mineral deposits. We have the Canadian Shield, the Appalachian Mountains, and the mountain ranges in the west. Everything from copper to diamonds to uranium lies beneath the soil. Water is abundant as well. Let's see. Historically, there's been a lot of migration to North America. I'm trying to find the right map here. Yeah, here's our migration map. Some of that was forced, so think about the Atlantic slave trade. And according to this map, North America is seeing some migration from Middle America now. So let's talk about the regions of the North American realm. Despite the fact that we're dealing with two countries, we're actually going to discuss 9 regions. So let's look at a map of these. We have the North American core, that's delineated by number 1. The Maritime Northeast, number 2. French Canada, number 3. The Southeast, number 4. The Southwest, number 5. The Pacific Hinge, number 6. The Western Frontier, number 7. The Continental Interior, number 8. And the Northern Frontier was number 9. Canada is interesting because it contains a very vibrant French culture in the province of Quebec. The primary language spoken in Quebec is French, although some people will say it's actually a dialect of French that's called Québécois. There's been a bit of a tumultuous history with Quebec vying for independence. Canada has also seen a greater recognition of its Indigenous population, referred to in Canada as First Nations peoples. The Canadian government honored a land treaty, and there's been a greater emphasis on protecting the First Nations people and their way of life. So this next map gives us a really good indication of the cultural and historic heritage of parts of the United States as westward expansion continued rapidly in the 19th century. So the first region we're going to look at is the North American core. This area actually contains more than a third of Canada and the United States population, and that is, it looks like that's marked by number 1, but I think I wrote number 7, so it's supposed to be number 1. So let's see. We're next going to look at the Maritime Northeast, and that lies north of the core. It extends from the northern border of Massachusetts and into Newfoundland. So it incorporates the Canadian Atlantic provinces of New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland and Labrador. Due to its climate, it has kind of a difficult environment. It's low on natural resources, and it relies heavily on tourism and recreation. French Canada represents the Canadian-speaking areas of Quebec, as well as the Acadians in New Brunswick. There's been a successionist movement in Quebec that's gained some momentum in the past. The Southeast is represented by a fairly large area of the United States. It has a warmer climate than the core, which made it ideal for the cultivation of crops such as sugar and tobacco, which played a major role in the spread of slavery in this region, and ultimately led to the succession of many southern states and the U.S. Civil War. This region is also prone to natural disasters, such as hurricanes. The Southwest is a mixing bowl of Anglo, Hispanic, and Native American cultures. Texas represents the largest area and also represents the majority of economic activity. There's been a number of issues with the border on this region, and since much of it borders Mexico, so immigration has been a focus. The Pacific Hinge includes southwestern British Columbia, most of California, but only the western parts of Oregon and Washington state. These places are lumped together in one region mainly because of economic considerations and trade connections across the Pacific Ocean. The western frontier includes eastern Washington state and Oregon, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, and the western parts of Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado. It also includes southern Alberta and British Columbia. This is a pretty dry area. It is growing rather quickly. The continental interior has traditionally been known for its agricultural contributions. And then finally, we look at the northern frontier. And this is the largest region of the realm. It covers 90% of Canada and all of Alaska, which is the largest U.S. state. It's sparsely populated, but it's rich in natural resources. Hopefully you've learned a little more about this region than you knew before you read these chapters. So next we're going to be looking at Middle America.